Chapter 11. The Storm. The next morning. Jack was the first to wake up. He noticed the hair from Maria, who was sleeping on his chest, had tickled his nose awake. He took the time to examine Maria's softer features. Her full cheeks, mesmerizing lips, and peaceful eyes lay in the safety of his arms. The night before was unforgettable to him. She was a woman that he had truly pursued because she was different. Her attitude, her ambition, and her idealism, along with her beauty, made her an exceptionally rare woman in Jack's eyes. Maybe I should spend the rest of my life with her, Jack thought to himself. A thunderous boom from outside the tent sprung Maria awake. Both of them jolted up. The boom was followed by the crackling of rifles. We are under attack, Jack instinctively knew, as the yells from both the security contractors and the civilians mixed in with the crackles and more incoming booms. Jack saw that there was a change of clothes for him, but when he scanned the area of the basic aid station, he couldn't find his plate carrier, helmet, or either his pistol or rifle in the tent. Where is my shit? Jack said, trying to contain his panic. Your boss, Matt, took them from you, Maria managed to say while she put her clothes on and grabbed the note that contained the clues to the treasure and stuffed it in her back pocket. Carlos said it wasn't a good idea for you to be armed. Jack knew that Carlos was right. It was standard protocol to keep a patient away from his weapons for some time, but it just couldn't come at a worse time. Bullet holes tore through the canvas roof of the tent, a sudden and perilous turn of events that forced Jack and Maria to dive to the ground for cover. The situation demanded swift action. Jack found himself in the daunting position of having to formulate a plan while under fire, a far from ideal circumstance for anyone involved. However, Jack recognized the urgency of the situation and considered his options. If he could procure a rifle, he could join the rest of the team in the firefight and potentially repel the assailants. Yet, there was a critical concern: Maria's safety. He was determined not to let her come to harm. Given the circumstances, it seemed prudent for Maria to seek refuge inside one of the tactical vehicles they had arrived in, as these cars were equipped with bulletproof armor that could provide her with much-needed protection. Jack grabbed Maria's hand and they ran low out of the tent towards the tactical vehicles. Before they could get 20 yards away from the tent, the impact of a large blast smashed and blew apart the aid station behind them, sending both of them flying through the air and landing hard into the dirt and grass. The explosion's shockwave reverberated through Jack's entire being, sending shivers down his body and making his head spin. He struggled to rise to his feet, but the persistent dizziness made it a formidable challenge. With determination, he managed to focus on Maria, who was experiencing the same disorienting effects just a short distance away, approximately 5 yards from him. He reached to shield her as unidentified individuals dressed in woodland camouflage and balaclavas toting M16s, AK-47s, and DSHKs walked into the camp. One combatant grabbed Maria by the hair. She tried to struggle and scream as she was being dragged away. Jack tried to get back up, but was kicked in the gut by another individual. He tried punching from the ground, but the dizziness from the cyanide had not worn off. Eventually, an individual raised the butt of his AK-47 and struck Jack in the left side of his temple, knocking him out. Jack regained consciousness, finding himself on his knees, with his hands securely bound behind his back. He was positioned beside Maria on his left and Dr. Taylor on his right. A thought crossed his mind. Why had their captors spared him? Then it dawned on him. He had been stripped of his weapons and any identifying markers as a security contractor, leaving their captors under the impression that he was an ordinary civilian. Jack focused on his breathing. His cross was still on him, and it gave him hope that he was going to make it if only he focused. Jack's realization settled in. He was trapped in the heart of an open field. The once standing tents had been reduced to wreckage, the field strewn with the lifeless bodies of security contractors and innocent civilians alike. Amid the chaos, Jack's heart clenched with concern for the safety of Carlos and Sal. He offered up a silent prayer. hoping that they had escaped the mayhem unharmed. In the distance, he watched with a heavy heart as enemy combatants commandeered the tactical vehicles they had arrived in. The steel behemoths roared to life, serving as grotesque transports for the ill-gotten treasures inside the bunker. The hostile individuals were all concealing their faces in balaclavas, but had instantly identified themselves when one set up a tripod and camera, while the other two unfolded a distinctive black and white flag. They were Islamic fundamentalists from the group Abu Sayyaf. Jack and his team were briefed on the current threats in the area, with this group being the biggest one. Even then, it was clear that the Boone Tactical had underestimated them. "Please, we are just archaeologists. We mean no harm," Dr. Taylor pleaded. The man guarding from behind came to the front, wielding a machete. He was speaking rapid Tagalog to the camera, which Jack couldn't understand. Dr. Taylor continued to plead in Tagalog, which increasingly angered the machete-wielding militant. The militant pointed his machete at Dr. Taylor, yelling at him in a threatening tone. Dr. Taylor continued to plead for his life, but the militant had enough. With his anger and visible hatred, he swung his machete into the middle of Dr. Taylor's skull. Jack looked in horror as the blade lodged into Dr. Taylor's head. Blood had oozed out onto the machete as the militant pulled the blade out and continued to hack into the archaeologist's skull. Brain matter and skull pieces had fallen out of the now limp body. Jack felt his pulse in his ears and struggled to breathe as he continued to look at the slain man next to him. The tension was broken by the sound of a commercial helicopter that whirred overhead and started to land on the field not far away from them. The militants stopped what they were doing as if they knew who this person was. Out of the black twin-rotor cargo helicopter, 10 men dressed in black, including their balaclavas, body armor, helmet, and goggles which covered their eyes, exited the back ramp of the helicopter and walked towards Jack and Maria in a tactical V formation. They were carrying QBZ-95 bullpup rifles as they fanned out across the field. When they found that the area was secured, they radioed for the last person to come out, in which a man in a light green linen suit walked out of the back ramp of the helicopter as the rotors started to relax. Jack couldn't make out who these guys were. Although it looked like they had high-end tactical gear, they weren't American military. The man in the green linen suit was texting on his phone, as if the destruction around him didn't matter. He put his phone back in his pocket and adjusted his Versace pilot sunglasses. He was the only one of the attackers with his face being shown as he inspected the carcass of Dr. Taylor with disgust and looked at Jack and Maria with contempt. The pale man looked to be a far cry away from anybody else in that area. His slender physique, with a well-groomed beard and man bun, said that he should be popping bottles and driving exotic cars in Dubai rather than be out here in the jungles and villages of Mindanao, Philippines. "What the frick is this?" the man said in an American accent, looking at the execution scene. "Sir, Cody, your gold is in the trucks," the leader with the machete spoke. "Leave us to our purpose." "Do whatever the heck you have to do. Just not in my sight," Cody said nonchalantly. Yet before he could walk over to the vehicles full of gold, he eyed Maria, who was tied up and disheveled from the ambush. "Hello, cutie. What brings you to this crappy place?" Cody said as he kneeled to eye level with Maria. She showed no fear, only a mix of exhaustion being overcome by her determination. She spit in his face. Cody was taken aback as he stood up in anger. Then, suddenly, he calmed down. "I understand and feel your anger. I know that you have an implicit bias toward a cisgender white man with privilege," Cody calmly explained. "You got a lot of fight in you. I think it's so empowering as a woman. Allow me to take you from this place," he offered. He was visibly deep in thought while looking at her. He then gazed at Jack, whom he had no care for. "Yeah, get rid of that one," Cody said, covering his eyes from what the terrorist was about to do to Jack. Jack's pulse quickened. as he tried to wiggle out of the rope that was binding his hands as he saw the blood-covered machete rise above him. "Wait!" Maria yelled. Everybody, including Jack, looked at her. "If you want treasure, my colleague and I were on our way to find a greater treasure than the measly gold you guys are loading up in your trucks." That got Cody's interest. "Go on," he laughed. "In my pocket, we grabbed a secret message from one of the soldiers in that bunker," she continued to explain. "Only we are able to transcribe it, so if you let us go, we will lead you to it." Another terrorist seized her bag and found the notes and maps that Jack and Maria intended to get through last night. Cody laughed softly with amusement. "Well then, let me take you from this toxic environment," Cody said, then cast a furtive glance towards one of his black-clad militants, silently instructing the operative to hoist Maria over his shoulder. Undaunted, Maria made a courageous attempt to resist. Cody then directed his gaze towards another militant armed with a menacing machete. The blade-wielding assailant began to raise his weapon menacingly over Jack's head. As Maria was forcibly carried away, her voice filled with anguish, screaming for Jack. It was a chilling realization for Jack. He never imagined this would be his fate. He had yearned for purpose, embarked on adventure, and discovered love. But now, it appeared that everything would come to a harrowing halt. The looming threat of execution on camera, while his beloved was carried off by an enigmatic and hostile force, left him in a heart-wrenching and uncertain predicament. Jack sought peace with the cross before he met his end. Earlier that morning, Sal stiffly awoke next to Mima, curled up with him on a mattress in the corner of the floor. The dry mouth, pulsing headache, and nausea meant that he was in for a hangover. It was the pre-dawn morning, and even though it was dark and he hadn't slept well, he still appreciated the soft body of Mima and continued to hold and embrace her warmly. Warmth was not commonly exercised by Sal, but he knew he was safe, at least for the night, with a total stranger. Then, he felt a hand on his shoulder pulling him back from Mima. His fighting instinct had kicked in, and he moved to throw a punch at whoever was pulling him. Sal's fist was caught by Carlos. He had a red lamp over his head and held an intravenous catheter in his hand. "Chill, amigo," Carlos jokingly said. "What are you doing?" Sal whispered angrily. "You feeling like death yet?" Carlos mocked as he showed him the needle and the IV bag that he was going to drip into him. "Damn it, that hurts," Sal stoically said as Carlos poked the needle through Sal's ulnar vein. Carlos tapped him on the head and shuffled back to his bed. Sal relaxed into the saline solution that was coursing through his veins. His body went limp after the pain from the hangover disappeared. He held Mima in his arms, drifting back to sleep as his eyes started to get heavy, looking at the dawn light seeping into the room. A distant rumble shook Sal awake. Mima gasped as well, and she ran to put her clothes on. "Bro, we gotta go now," Carlos yelled into the room, still getting his shirt on with his medical bag in hand. Sal, still confused, went to button up his shirt. He heard the crackling and booms of distant gunfire and explosions. That realization jolted him alert. The camp was under attack. Sal met Carlos taking concealment next to the door of the hut, peeking out with his pistol to see if anyone had infiltrated the village. Sal and Carlos were both about to run to the camp when Kiki pulled them back in. "Kiki, let go!" Carlos shouted. Kiki slapped him. "Don't disrespect me, Sir Carlos," Kiki scolded as she brought them into her room. She moved the carpet, which revealed a trapdoor. Inside the trapdoor was one AK-47 and one Dragunov SVD sniper rifle, along with 2 bandoliers full of ammo. A box of grenades was in the corner of the pit, with one visibly removed. Carlos and Sal were caught surprised. "Dibs on the sniper," Carlos quickly said. "Yeah, maybe when you can learn how to use it," Sal said, grabbing the sniper rifle and forcing the AK-47 into Carlos's arms. Both of them shifted through towards the edge of the forested area bordering the camp. From where they were, the duo had a good overwatch of the camp, while being concealed at the edge of the tree line. They saw that most of the tents had burned down or were completely removed, only leaving a ditch. The vehicles they came in on were commandeered by whoever attacked the camp and were staged in a row on the road leading through the village. The aggressors were busy packing the gold bars into the back of the trucks. "Crap," Sal muttered. Looking through the sniper scope, Sal could see Jack, Maria, and Dr. Taylor on their knees, while the Abu Sayyaf flag had been unfurled next to them. He could also see the camera and the man wielding a machete. Sal focused the sniper rifle's crosshairs over the machete-wielding man. "Wait, dude," Carlos whispered and gently put his hand on the gun. The machete-wielding man continued to hack into Dr. Taylor's skull. "What the hell are you doing?" Sal whispered in frustration. "We have to come up with a plan. If you shoot one of them, we are all dead," Carlos mentioned. The motion of the bushes drew both of them to raise their rifles behind them. In front of them was their boss, Matt. He was just as unprepared as Carlos and Sal, only toting his pistol as he patrolled the duo's position. "Relax, dickheads. I'm glad to see you guys are all right," Matt said. A helicopter whirred overhead and set down in the field. Out came unknown armed professionals and a man in a green linen suit. "Matt, this ain't good. We need to get Jack and Maria out of there," Carlos briefed Matt on the situation. "I can see that, mate," Matt said confidently, scanning around the camp to assess possible solutions. He noticed the debris around the field was enough to conceal his body. "Gents, I'll sneak around and get close to the survivors. I need you to cover me. When I give the signal, light them up and cover my ass until I get back here," Matt instructed. They agreed, and Matt holstered his pistol. He then cut around the side of the wooded area and ran from truck to truck when he saw that no one was looking. Sal kept his crosshairs on the man with the machete, hoping that Matt had enough time to save Jack. Through the scope, Sal noticed the conversation the man in the green linen suit had with Maria, and how one of his men started to pick her up and drag her away to the helicopter. Matt had got into position at a nearby tactical vehicle 5 meters away from Jack. "Don't miss," Carlos said out of nervousness. "I won't," Sal said calmly. Jack looked into the eyes of the man who would kill him with defiance. Yet, as soon as he brought the machete down, the side of the man's head exploded into pink mist. A rifle's boom was heard in the distance, and Jack felt someone grab him from behind. It was Matt who helped him up to his feet. "Let's go!" Jack heard Matt yell. From the concealment of the trees that Matt had directed Jack to approach, the rhythmic burst of an AK-47 assault rifle resounded. Jack, spurred by sheer urgency, sprinted at an unprecedented speed. The other militants, engrossed in their task of loading the plundered gold, took a fleeting moment to comprehend that they were under attack. This brief pause afforded Jack and Matt a valuable window to make their dash for the safety and obscurity of the tree line. Jack was stunned and relieved to find that Carlos and Sal were unharmed and had even come to his rescue. "Let's hustle out of here," Carlos said. "But we have to go for Maria," Jack protested. "Mate, we can't get to her right now. We have to leave," Matt argued, letting Jack loose from his rope cuffs. A hail of small arms gunfire tore through the jungle, compelling everyone to drop down for cover. As Jack descended to the forest floor, he swiftly scanned his surroundings to ensure the safety of his team. Sal remained firmly entrenched behind a tree, his sniper rifle at the ready. Carlos, lying on the ground, was in the process of rising to engage the enemy in return fire. Matt, gasping and writhing in pain, lay nearby. The initial thought that raced through Jack's mind was the distressing notion that their team leader had been wounded. In the midst of combat, time seemed to stretch, and Jack's adrenaline-fueled senses adapted to the chaos enveloping him. His years as a Recon Marine and Boone tactical contractor had provided a foundation of training. But now he was faced with the reality of being in mortal combat and facing superior firepower, grappling with a casualty and lacking reinforcements in this hostile environment. Recalling the lessons of passion in his heart and control in his mind, Jack resolved to harness both, recognizing that in this pivotal moment, he had to rise to the occasion or die. "Carlos, Matt's hit," Jack commanded. "Damn it," Carlos said, moving to Matt while Sal made precise shots toward the camp, keeping the opponents' heads down. Carlos threw Jack the AK-47 and assessed the casualty, while Jack took up a position next to him, popping single shots due to the fact he only had one 30-round magazine in the rifle. "I got bullet wound through the right femur," Carlos yelled, going into his bag and strapping a tourniquet around the highest portion of Matt's leg. Matt was conscious and writhing in pain, which was a good sign for Carlos. It meant that he was still breathing. However, upon further assessment, Carlos saw a hole in his chest. As he lifted Matt up, he saw that the hole had passed through him. "I got a sucking chest wound. I can work on him, but we have to get out of here," Carlos yelled over the intense gunfire going back and forth. As Jack sought cover behind a tree, he found himself facing a difficult decision. The thought of Maria's suffering, possibly subjected to torture or worse, weighed heavily on his mind, but her knowledge was a potential lifeline for her own survival. Now, in this moment, Jack was responsible for 2 of his brothers and 1 casualty. A quick assessment of the situation revealed that approximately 25 armed militants, not including the 10 armed professionals guarding Maria en route to the helicopter, were closing in on his position. Jack recognized that a direct assault would be a reckless, suicidal move. The only prudent course of action was to survive the current ordeal, with the hope of living to fight another day. Jack's AK-47 went empty. "Carlos, give me your ammo and grab Matt. Sal, stay with Carlos and move back into the village," Jack ordered, hoping there would be a better fighting position and possibly some transportation in the village. Carlos tossed his bandolier to Jack and picked up Matt over his shoulder, darting into the woods towards the village. "Set!" Jack yelled to Sal, firing toward the enemy with a fresh magazine of rounds. "Moving!" Sal yelled, getting ready to follow Carlos. "Move!" Jack ordered and gave a short burst of gunfire from the AK-47 as Sal raced toward Carlos. Jack soon followed suit and raced to meet them, breaking contact with the enemy. Jack was confused at how Carlos and Sal knew to run to the small hut where Kiki and Mima lived in. As they entered, the 2 women cleared a table for Carlos to lay down Matt. Carlos rechecked to see if the tourniquet was still keeping the blood from coming out of the now unconscious Matt's leg, then proceeded to go into his med bag to grab some chest seals. After slapping them on both sides of the chest wound, Carlos noticed that his breathing was labored on the injured side of his chest. While Carlos worked on him, Jack and Sal set security outside the door, waiting for the encroaching enemy and listening to their distant commands, which sounded like a different language than Tagalog. "Carlos, you gotta move, man," Jack ordered. "Hold on, I gotta start a needle D," Carlos explained quickly as he thrust a small needle with a tube catheter around it into the second intercostal space of Matt's chest. After hearing the hiss of released air, he withdrew the needle as he pushed the catheter into his chest. Carlos then leaned in to listen to Matt's lungs. "We're good," Carlos said, before gunfire ripped through the wood and cement of the house, forcing everybody back down. Jack and Sal started to return fire as Carlos picked Matt back up. "Sir Carlos," Kiki yelled, "there's a hospital 5 miles south down the road. I have a friend you can contact." Jack heard. If he could get Matt to the hospital, hopefully either the Filipino armed forces or the possible American presence could support them and end this fight. But first, he had to find transportation. "Ma'am, do you have a car?" Jack asked Kiki. "Here is the key for the truck." Kiki reached into her pocket and gave him a single key with the imprint of Nissan on it. "It's the village truck. Down the road on the right side of the highway out of here," Carlos remembered. "It's a rust bucket, but it'll get us there faster than our feet," he also commented. "Get Matt up. Sal, cover us. We are getting out of here," Jack commanded. The village had a primary dirt road connecting it to the highway. Given the village's economic status, the 1989 white Nissan pickup was accustomed to making trips to and from larger markets on the island. The truck offered Jack, Carlos, Sal, and Matt a potential means of escape, contingent on the absence of any pursuing militants in the commandeered tactical vehicles. The team faced a daunting task. They had to cover a 500-meter distance from the house to the truck. Jack surmised that the cinder block huts and small village structures could provide some cover against the pursuing militants. Nonetheless, caution was essential, since the militants were converging from the main road onto the highway with the looted vehicles and stolen gold. Under Jack and Sal's protective cover, Carlos shouldered the burden of carrying the wounded Matt as they navigated through the jungle to reach the first cinder block building in sight. From this vantage point, they could perceive the ground trembling with the approach of the vehicles and hear the militants urging the local residents to clear the way. Jack recognized the necessity of employing leapfrog tactics, moving his team along the backside of the village buildings. The challenge lay in reaching the truck, which was parked just off the highway before the militants could potentially target it or the team with the hijacked armed vehicles. As Jack's team moved covertly, making sure security was set with Sal before moving Carlos and Matt, he noticed the telephone poles that ran along the main stretch of the road. They stood tall over the oncoming convoy of stolen tactical vehicles, carrying a near dangerous amount of wires. Jack thought if he could tear down the telephone poles, it might stop the enemy convoy in its tracks, for at least a while. As Jack maintained his position as rear security while Sal, Carlos, and Matt moved on to the next building, he noticed a militant stationed around the corner of the building ahead, opposite to where Jack was positioned with his rifle. Jack initially detected the militant's presence by observing his shadow, but he hesitated to engage the target. Firing a single shot could potentially alert the others and jeopardize his team's safety. The militant, seemingly oblivious to Jack's presence, moved closer to the corner of the building to urinate. It was during this moment that Jack spotted a grenade attached to the militant's vest. As Jack discreetly peered around the corner, the militant suddenly noticed his movement and reached for his weapon, which he had leaned against the side of the wall. In a swift reaction, Jack lunged forward and pulled the militant behind the wall before he could be seen by others. Jack attempted to employ a rear chokehold, a technique commonly practiced in the Marine Corps to restrict blood flow to the victim's brain, potentially causing them to lose consciousness. Simultaneously, he grappled with the militant's mouth in an effort to muffle any screams that might alert his comrades. With his arms occupied, the militant managed to retrieve a karambit knife from his pocket and swung it towards Jack's face. In response, Jack released the chokehold, deflecting the knife and twisting the militant's arm backward, causing him to drop the weapon. Jack forced the man down onto his hands and knees, attempting to apply a chokehold. However, the militant managed to lift his leg and firmly plant his feet on the ground. With a powerful shove, he toppled Jack over, causing him to fall to the ground. The militant's aggression was so pure, looking into Jack's eyes with hatred as he put both of his hands on Jack's neck. Jack scrambled around, feeling for the knife in the grass. His windpipe was crushing, and he could see the darkness in his vision. Yet, with all of his might, he told himself he wasn't going to die here. He felt the handle of the knife in the long grass, gripped it with all of his might, and jammed the curved, razor-sharp steel into the ear of the militant. Jack curved the blade towards the back of the militant's brain. The lively, aggressive eyes went cold as blood poured from his mouth onto Jack. Jack's adrenaline gave him focus. He took no time to brush the dead man off of him and grabbed the grenade from his vest. The team was waiting for him at the adjacent cinder block and wood hut. Sal's rifle was at the high ready position, but once he saw Jack win the fight, he lowered his weapon. Once regrouped, Jack noticed that the tactical vehicles were slowly driving through the small dirt road next to a large telephone pole in between a large building and the bar where Carlos and Sal spent the night. It would make a great choke point. With his quick and tactical calculations, Jack tossed the grenade. The 5-meter explosion radius blew out the bottom of the nearby telephone pole, collapsing all of the wires on top of the first tactical vehicle and electrocuting the militant in the turret of the vehicle. Jack was silently amazed that he was able to do that, but that amusement fell short as the second tactical vehicle rolled up into view, siding Jack's team. "Move!" Jack ordered the team to sprint to the truck. The roar of the mounted 50 cal machine gun on top of the second vehicle punched rounds through the cinder blocks of the buildings and huts, spraying the team with dust and chipped wood. The small white pickup truck was just out of range of the vehicles stuck in the convoy. As expected, it was parked on the side of the highway just past a few cement roadblocks that probably kept any drivers from ramming into the nearby huts. Jack pulled rear security for the oncoming foot patrol of militants, taking cover behind one of the cement roadblocks that bordered the highway. Carlos dropped Matt in the back of the truck and reassessed all of his medical interventions, keeping Matt alive. Sal went to the driver's seat of the truck and started the engine. The engine started to run, but died soon after. "What's going on?" Jack said, trying to contain his adrenaline. "It's out of gas," Sal yelled. Fortunately for them, Jack noticed plastic gas containers that were at the side of the hut nearest them. "Sal, grab these gas canisters. I'll cover you," Jack ordered. Sal left his rifle in the car and rushed into a low sprint towards the hut while Jack kept his eyes out. As soon as Sal grabbed the canisters, bullets ricocheted near Sal. Jack noticed that militants were creeping up the main road and the back road that they had just came through. He swung up his AK-47 and fired in short bursts, dropping some of the militants on the road like puppets cut from their marionettes. Jack went through one magazine by the time Sal started pouring the gas into the gas tank. He threw the empty magazine away and inserted a new one from his bandolier into the well of the rifle and racked the charging handle back. By the time Jack got his sights again, the militants were getting closer. He kept suppression by fire with his rifle, but the overwhelming amount of enemies crept closer to Jack. Jack ran out of ammo. Fortunately for him, he could hear, over the bullets ricocheting and the guns firing, the engine starting to run. "Get in!" Sal and Carlos yelled. Jack pulled back towards Sal and Carlos and threw himself into the bed of the truck. With Carlos pulling him in, Sal put the engine into first gear and started to move. The truck by no means had the acceleration of a modern-day car, but they were moving. Jack, Carlos, and Sal thought that they could relax, but they heard the rumblings of another tactical vehicle bursting out of the jungle and onto the road behind them. The large metallic beast crept up onto the tiny pickup truck like a predator on its prey. The roaring burst of the 50 cal turret sprayed bullets around the truck as Sal tried to dodge them. Jack struggled to reload under the stress of an oncoming vehicle and the jerky movement shifts of his truck. Sal had now shifted into fifth gear and floored the gas. Jack stabilized himself on the edge of the truck bed, aimed down his sights, and fired a burst toward the turret gunner. Only one bullet hit the militant in the neck, but he dropped into the turret hole. Carlos and Jack sighed and smiled at each other in relief. However, the driver inside was still alive. The large armored vehicle inched closer as the small pickup truck sped across the highway. None of the bullets Jack fired at the vehicle could even make a hole in the car. The metallic beast roared as it hit the end of the truck's bumper, causing a catastrophic shift forward that extensively damaged the bed of the truck. All it would take was another, more powerful hit, and their truck would spin out and roll over, killing Jack, Sal, Carlos, and Matt. The armored vehicle slowed down to gain some ramming distance while Jack and Carlos braced themselves for the next hit. Out of the sky came a small missile that punched straight through the armor of the steel beast and blew out the reinforced windows. The shockwave of the blast picked up the hind wheels of the truck, throwing Jack and Carlos back. When the wheels hit the road again, they blew off the axle, sending the two back forward and the truck spinning and landing in a ditch off of the road. Jack hit his head on the floor of the truck bed, putting him into a daze. Kicking the driver's side door open, Sal ran to the bed of the truck. "Move, guys, move!" Sal shouted, grabbing Matt and thrusting him on his shoulder. Carlos and Jack clung to each other for support as they staggered out of the car. The team hurriedly moved away from the vehicle. Meanwhile, the leaking fuel from the car formed a trail leading toward the fire that had ignited near the axles. The ensuing explosion engulfed the truck in flames, propelling everyone onto the jungle floor beside the road. As Jack got up, with ringing in his ears and intense drowsiness, he could see two AW-109 Trekker utility helicopters in the sky racing towards the village they just escaped. Another two AW-159 Wildcat helicopters landed on the front and the rear of the highway they were on. Out of one helicopter sprang out 12 dark, digital camouflaged members of the Philippine 1st Scout Regiment. The second had 2 members of the United States Air Force's pararescue with the letters PJ on their plate carriers. The PJs grabbed a litter and hoisted Matt onto the helicopter while Jack, Sal, and Carlos followed, doggedly, into the troop bay of the helicopter. The trio was checked out by another PJ waiting in the troop bay. Within seconds, both helicopters loaded everyone back in and took off. Out of the window of the bay doors, Jack could see the fire and smoke coming from the village and the now barren camp in the distance of the jungle. He looked to check if both Carlos and Sal were okay. He could see that their eyes had started to droop. Jack felt it too. His adrenaline was turning off. He was exhausted, but only one thought started to fill his head. I have to save Maria.